So we've got my basic lines I usually put in just to see how somebody's moving. So first thing I like to look at it with Rory's golf swing, you can see he's got a definite little trigger there. So he has a little tightening of his arms and a little shift. That's been there for a long time, as long as I've been watching Rory's golf swing. But you can see he shifts a little early, and then his pelvis is really shifting back to the center as his arms are finishing their route to the top. So that's a nice little recentering move. You'll also notice if you use the sign behind him, you can see where it says 205 yards. He doesn't stay the same height. So 205 is covered, now it's not. And so Rory actually is a little later dropper than most. And a lot of that's because of his nervous system is pretty high. He's got a very fast ability to recover from a later drop.
That transition, though, that's the golden ticket right there.
Oh yeah. So if we think about swinging like an athlete and all the things we talk about, he's got wonderful flow.
In the new athlete swing, that loading step, that's it right there. So when Milo's talking about loading, most people think loading like in the backswing or loading. We're loading there in transition. We're actually stretching the system a little bit more in transition. So you can see as his arms are still going back, he's starting to walk away from his hands. That's that baseball term that Milo uses.
So in our system, I would call this winding. So he's winding the system, and then as you see him drop, that transition right there, there's an extra stretch happening in that lead shoulder, lead lat, that's getting really strung tight right here. So now he's got all this energy pent up that he can just let unload through the golf ball. And there's no holding back here. This is just a freewheeling golf swing. He just slingshots that thing around. So let's take a look at him from down the line. Well, you can kind of see his posture. He's got a little flatter back than most of the legends. A lot of that is the era he grew up in and how mobile he is. This guy is like...
I think working out too.
Oh, yeah.
And when he was younger, he had much more of a rounded back.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. He was...
His posture's gotten a little bit more rigid as he's...
The curly hair days.
Yeah. And his swing has gotten a little more rigid looking as well. When he was young, that thing was a flowing swing. But this one sure is powerful. You know, it's pretty textbook. Club just outside the hands. This camera angle's a little more on his body line. So that club's really not as far outside of his hands as it appears there. And then as he winds to the top, you know, we've got a pretty darn square club face. The left wrist is not flexed. He has a slightly stronger grip, so he needs a little bit of cupping in that left wrist so the club face doesn't get overly shut. And then we can really see, if you use the fence line in the background there, you can really see how much he is flexing down into the ground right there. You know, he went from up on the fence to down into the ground, and during this phase, he's really stretching that system. So that lead arm is really getting loaded, and he re-squares to there. Rory really doesn't get his trail arm all that much in front of him. His more just moves with him. Doesn't get trapped, and you can see at P6, the club head is just inside of his hands. You know, this is textbook.
If you go back to, I don't know, left arm parallel in the backswing, Milo, somewhere in there, you can see, and we're going to talk about this a little bit later with a student we're going to analyze, but his belt buckle really doesn't turn that much off the ball, maybe at most 45 degrees. So what is the winding? Well, the winding is, there's some element of that torso winding up almost against the trail leg, and that's how you get that internal hip rotation. And that's how you wind into that trail foot, just like we've talked about with Fast Eddie in the past, how we load that trail leg. You can fake do it, you can straighten the right leg and have your pelvis point at the camera, but that's not going to let you use your whole system correctly. You're not going to be able to land from there.
For sure. And you can see how he looks like he's really wound into that leg. He still has some bend. Still has some bend in that trail knee. It's not, that thing's not straight. I don't even know if it has straightened all that much. It just has moved back.
On the face-on Milo, sometimes with driver, he gets a little to the outside of his foot just because of how much he winds his torso.
Well, if we zoom in here, you can still
But,
see, watch what his foot does. Just
yeah.
before he transitions, see his big toe come off the ground?
Yeah. But for some people we work with, it's not the same. You see that where they get almost too lateral, too off, too spun. His is done a little differently.
Yeah, his big toe's coming off the ground as his right hip is circling.
Yeah.
That's really that foot's getting so screwed into the ground, so tight,
Yeah.
that it just pulls the big toe up. He's not getting outside of his feet.
Yeah.
His hips are inside of his ankles. So he's basically right at the ball at 3, and then as he transitions, he's one of the guys whose hands actually drop under their backswing plane.
Sometimes 2 under.
That's part of what allows him to have a lot of in-out path. So Rory is known to have a big in-out path, and he's a drawer generally, and he hits the ball extremely high.
When he struggles is when he starts getting a little too under, a little too hooky, and his wedges really suffer from there too.
Yep. But one thing I really love about Rory's golf swing is he has very rapid chest rotation through the strike.
Oh yeah.
So
that's probably the only reason he can get away with the hands being deep as they are.
yeah, most people, if their hands drop down and we're this deep, we're in deep doo-doo. But this guy has the ability to really unwind his chest.
Yeah.
So he goes from having his chest pretty darn closed still at, well, he wound up so big, there's a long ways to go.
Yeah.
But at P6, his chest is back to square like it's supposed to be. And then from there, at impact, we can clearly see his back.
Yeah.
So his chest is definitely quite open.
And what's nice for him is he's probably never going to have a back injury with his pattern because his pelvis and chest are, pretty close to lined up there. He doesn't have a ton of side bend, but he has a nice tilt in his pelvis. I mean,
his side bend and his rotation are pretty much matching up here.
Yeah.
And if you want to know how open his chest is relative to his target line, watch which way the ball goes. So the ball's going this direction.
Yep.
His chest is pointing not the same direction. So
hey, Milo, just to support what you said earlier, Sportsbox did a recent measurement of him, and it was interesting that he shifts off the ball with the driver on average about 2.1 inches from the target. And then he goes 5 inches back toward the target.
yeah, so he's got 7 inches of total lateral motion. Is that pelvis or rib? That's pelvis, right?
That's his pelvis.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
And then he actually drops about 2.4 inches in his backswing before he starts rising 1.4 inches from that.
Yeah.
So that's where that handle starts to rise and he can start hitting it a mile. Interestingly enough, he actually has about 70 degrees of X factor stretch. So when you talk about loading into that trail leg, and he's not necessarily, straightening that leg, he's turning into that leg. He's got 70 degrees, and then he actually increases it as he's flexing another 7 degrees to 77.
Yeah, he's got
just unwinding his chest off the planet.
Amazing thoracic mobility because he winds his pelvis less than 45. I think last time I looked at it, it was something like upper 30s, but his torso is wound up like 110 degrees.
Yep.
So it's incredible. Most humans can't do that. But
interestingly enough, he actually closes that gap by impact to 5 degrees difference.
Yeah, they almost line up. So his chest rotation in the downswing is extremely fast.
Yep.
That's how you get speed to the club head. So chest rotation in the downswing it's a speed producer. It's how you sling the energy out into the club head. It's one of the more dynamic golf swings in the world. He's not a very big guy, and he's maybe the longest guy on the tour.
I think he's leading the tour in driving right now.
Yeah.
Distance.
He's not the fastest ball speed, but he's up there. But his launch conditions are the best. So he hits the ball high, not a lot of spin, and just absolutely gets maximum carry out of it.
What did you had that one other camera angle?
Oh yeah, this is a cool one. So let's look at this camera angle. So I really like this one because you can see his arms are still stretching up and he's shifting his pelvis forward. And then you'll be able to see when his tailbone, so right there, that's where his tailbone's at. The rest of his downswing, watch which way that goes. Back and around. So he's really not going that much more forward, at least his lead hip's not. When you unwind, your center of your pelvis does move forward, but you can really see how he's unwinding the system there. So he drops into the lead side and then unwind, unwind, unwind. And if you look at how his arms are moving, in this part of the golf swing, I don't see a whole lot happening. I see the arms just kind of being carried by the middle unwinding. And then they slingshot out. You know, they're getting a little bit more stretched right there in that little drop and re-squaring phase. They're getting really loaded.
Yeah.
But he's not throwing them out early.
The other thing I'm noticing right there is that, you know, you showed that pelvis and how the tailbone's kind of going back and around, but it's not separating. It's not like he's ripping the pelvis way around while his chest is getting left behind. To me, it looks like his left shoulder is moving around just about the same rate as that tailbone.
Yeah, I see everything kind of moving as a team. It's a systematic unwind. It's not like...
Because if your chest is doing that, it's going to be on top and you're going to get the low point where you want it. But if you try to fire your pelvis or rotate your pelvis, your chest will probably get left behind and you probably will get a little tilty too.
Another fun thing to look at right here. Zoom in, watch that left foot.
Boom.
Which way is it planting?
This is great. I got a few questions in the chat and they're all getting answered.
Before you go there, let's talk about thoracic bend. Let's watch his upper thoracic spine. At the top, it's curving to the left.
Yeah.
And then as he recenters and pushes back, watch him go into right bend right there.
Yeah, see all these
spine
wrinkles?
is starting to curve to the right. He does it with his upper thoracic spine. He is not doing it with his lower lumbar.
Yeah. So his thoracic spine is flexing, but when a thoracic spine flexes and there's still the X factor still in the system, it bends the right side. So we see the compression happening over here. And you can really see those, you can see how his right side's long, and now we got all these wrinkles formulating right here. So
Funny, if you took a photo of that position just a couple frames back and compared that to a baseball hitter, I bet those would look really similar.
Yep.
The same.
All right.
Okay, that's enough of Rory. He's too good.
We all wish we could swing like that.
Yeah, if you want to swing like an athlete, there you go. That's one.
Yeah.
That's a good athlete.